talks with. Well, I think it's a fan favourite. Once upon a time, New Zealand hated this guy, but I suppose after this year and what he did with the America's Cup, I think, I think he's a fan amongst them more. Look, the man needs no introduction when you're talking about people on the water. One of the most decorated sailors. He's done plenty, but he's a household name when it comes to the America's Cup. 20 years of age when he was the youngest helmsman to lead Young Australia. He was 30 years of age when they actually won the America's Cup. He defended it twice, one successfully, one not so successfully, but we also saw firsthand just months ago that, he took Team New Zealand Emirates right down to the wire. That man who is quite often the man I refer to as the man is not human, Jimmy Spithill. Thanks for joining us, brother.
Yeah, thank you, brother. It's never thought I'd say this, but I actually miss seeing you first thing in the morning, mate, for a session.
I just miss bashing you and having that chat all about it. But, look, you're definitely one of those guys that I like being around. And I was accused a number of times of having a bromance with you. But, after the conversation we have today, I think a lot of people out there are going to understand why people get attracted to people like yourself in terms of the high performance, the mindset, everything about you. And I tell a lot of people in terms of the athletes that I've trained, and worked alongside, top 2%. So where are you now and what are you up to, bro?
Oh, thanks, mate. And, back at you. Man, I look back on all that work we did in New Zealand up in the lead up to that cup, and definitely some of the most memorable times. There's something about to really forge, well, from my experience anyway, to really forge a real relationship. It happens through some real hard work, some struggle, and just getting up for the rest of them and putting the hours in and not shortcutting. And that was certainly the case for you and I. And man, it was definitely one of the highlights from that past America's Cup was all that time that I really got to learn from you and spend just every morning getting up while they were in bed. But right now I'm in San Diego. We were set up, my family and I, in New Zealand, really enjoying it. And kids are in school, sport, etc. But unfortunately, the strategy in New Zealand it just doesn't allow someone like myself to really live there, because it just involves leaving. And, I did 3 quarantines, and it just, man, it's tough, especially, what it's like when you're active. It's really difficult sort of being stuck in a room, for weeks on end. So for the young family, we had to bite the bullet and move up to the Northern Hemisphere where the borders are open, and it's been great. We've transitioned. It's summer here, so that's good in Southern California. And yeah, mate, no, we're enjoying it.
No, that's great. We're going to talk about your family because it's a big part of your life and your purpose, and also sacrifice that's involved, because you mentioned time away. Even though we don't have quarantine where you are now, there's still a lot of time away from your family. But let's go back to when you're just a wee nipper. Let's go back to Pittwater with a population of less than 50,000, and go back to a moment where it's 1983. And there was 2 guys, I believe they were your neighbours, right? And they're a part of Australia too. Colin Birchall and Rob Brown. They had just won the America's Cup, the old mug. And you were 4 years of age, and it seemed to have an effect on a young Jimmy Spithill.
Yeah, it did. I mean, both Rob and Colin were neighbours, and where we grew up was pretty unique. I mean, it was in the Australian National Park, and the only way to get there was by boat. So, we used to go to school by boat to get to the mainland, to where the car was. Very, very simple. And, naturally, when you came home from school, you would either go up in the bush, but, in the Australian bush, everything can kill you. So, then the water looked a little, the odds looked better. So, we'd spend most of the time on the water and just mucking around at anything we could find. But yeah, Colin and Rob were both on Australia too. And, at that time, Australia was going through a real depression, the entire country. And I mean, America hadn't been beaten in something like 130 years in the America's Cup. And here we were, the little sort of battler nation up against, big America. And we were down, big Dennis Conner had the Australia 2 boys at match point, and they ended up coming back and really pulling off the impossible. And it just, I mean, if you speak to, I speak to my parents and friends and, adults from that day and that period, they say it just lifted the entire country, out of this depression. So much so that the Prime Minister actually came on live TV after they crossed the finish line drunk, Bob Hawke, he was an absolute beauty, and just said, look, any employer that, that fires any of the employees today is a bum on national TV, So it was just one of those iconic moments in Australian sport, and that had an effect on me because of my neighbours, but also because it was a way of life. That's how I got anywhere. I got my independence, was I had to get literally on a boat to get to the mainland.
Yeah. Do you think, there's a bit of naivety there for you and naivety for me growing up too? Because my dad had done wonderful things on the world stage and not realizing how much was involved in us living that sheltered life in our younger years. And for you, your neighbor, that was able to do something that no one else was able to do in 130 odd years. That along with what other sort of foundation you learned from that beautiful place of Pittwater, being surrounded by water, because you know what? It's one thing to be surrounded by water, but that doesn't mean you got to be bloody any good at it.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty amazing because it was a community where the houses were all open. Like it was definitely very simple, but it was everyone knew everyone, and so from a certain point of view, it kind of self-policed everyone, and it actually reminds me of some of my mates that live in Hawaii, where they say, well, everyone kind of gets along because you're going to run into everyone at the local store.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool because you have this community, and what that allowed as kids was ultimate freedom. We would just go, and we would be in the bush or off on rowing boats or whatever, just swimming. Like it was like the Wild West on water, and so that was great. It was a great way to grow up, but yeah, you definitely took it for granted that that you were there. But it took you out of your comfort zone because, man, I mean, it's not like a picture perfect, beautiful sunset every time you're trying to get home. If it's a storm, well, you got to get the groceries home. You got to carry them up the hill. You got to get in the car to the boat. So just anything, you picture driving into your driveway. Well, it's nothing like that. It's like you got this full adventure every day of your life to get somewhere. So that kind of, I think, really created independence, anyone that lived there, because you had to have some drive to get out and do something.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, because like we have to wait to a certain age before we get our license, before we're able to even just to learn how to drive the car. And even then, when you think it's bad and crazy on the road, it's nothing like the water, which is unpredictable with the weather and everything else. When did you first get your chance to do that? And I didn't think about that in terms of the lessons you learn early on, because if you get it wrong, it's quite dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a lot of close calls, and I remember just for school, going down to get in the tinny, and my little sister was there, and the next thing you know, mum's dressed to go to work, and she's had to jump in because my sister's just jumped in, and she's only a toddler, she's only 2 or 3. Wow, so that would just, and other times when we were little kids and we'd somehow found our way down through the bush down the hill, got out of the house, and again, very young age, and mum's just got down there and caught us, before we've jumped in off the rock. So yeah, look, there was a bunch of lessons, but I think probably for all of us, you look back and you think, well, I've got kids now, and I think, man, what were my parents doing? But in a lot of ways, I think it's probably a little bit sad too that we are, I find myself probably a little overprotective, because that was so important, I thought, in learning some of those lessons, and along the way, a bit of character building at the same time.
Were you an ambitious little kid? You obviously were, because we spoke about in 1983 with the neighbours doing what they did. Did you have that mindset from an early age? I mean, what set you apart from every other kid that was doing the same thing as you, which was taking their boat to school, from school, every time you left home?
Yeah, the big break for me was I got a windsurfer when I think I was around 5 years old. And so that really was the ultimate, because that stage we didn't, we sort of had one little tinny. It was just this old sort of a bomb of a thing that would just leak, and so it didn't. A mate had a rowing boat, so we'd sort of, I would get a go in that every now and then. But the windsurfer was just like the real freedom thing, like you could come back, and it was better than going up into the bush. Like you really did feel like you were sort of escaping. And so that I just remember sitting in class at school and having absolutely zero interest on what was happening on the blackboard, and I'd just be looking out the window, and I'd see the branches and the leaves moving in the trees, and thinking, man, I just can't wait to get home and get on the windsurf and just off we go. Kind of like probably like a surfer, just wanting to get on a wave,
Mm.
go ride a wave. So yeah, that was a big breakthrough for me. Was just the windsurfing. And then the next one was probably, we used to have a council cleanup. So, twice a year, a barge would come around and people would just be throwing out, like old fridges, all sorts of junk. And anyway, our neighbour was throwing away a little wooden dinghy sailing boat. And so so my dad, my sister and I, we grabbed it, we brought it back, we repaired it, we painted it. And then that was the thing we would do now when we came back from school. Fast forward, one day Dad said, hey, listen, on the mainland, they race these things. And so he said, why don't you go over and give it a go? I said, right. So over we sailed. It was a decent sail. Dad followed in the tinny, got there, pulled the boat up, and, all these flash fiberglass, brand new boats were there. And our sails were rusty, like they were off the garbage pile. So pulled the boat up, and instantly, a bunch of kids come around the boat and just basically just start ridiculing the boat.
Yeah, of course.
To the point where my sister was crying, and anyway, so Dad comes over and goes, look, don't worry about what anyone says here. You guys know your boat. You actually built and repaired this, and you've been sailing it. Just get out there, give it a go, and let's see what happens. And it was pretty windy that day. And so anyway, so Dad just drew the course in the sand, like we had no idea. So out we went, did the course, and we crossed the line, and a gun went off. And anyway, so we sailed ashore, pulled the boat up on the beach, and so, we'd won the race, and same group of kids came around the boat, but no one was laughing. And so it was just one of those real key moments that, I'll never forget, in that, you can never really judge a book by its cover, and don't worry too much about sort of what everyone else has got.
100%. I love that. Now, what I find interesting is in 1983, at 4 years of age, you had aspirations of being in the America's Cup. And I'm trying to think of how you stayed focused through that time, because, it was, 16 years, 15 years before you actually went on to be the youngest helmsman in an America's Cup for Young Australia. But in that time, normally when there's other sort of things to take your interest away from it, how did you stay focused? And was it always about that, or did you drift in and out? Was it ability that brought you back, or how did you stay on that steady line or compass, pointing north to where you wanted to be?
Yeah, well, definitely my old man was a massive influence, a lot like you, actually. He played a huge role in my life, real hard worker, and, really just he's flat out working during the week, and really sort of dedicated the weekends when he wasn't working, helping us. At a certain point, where we grew up, a big thing in Australia was a huge drinking mentality, especially around this area. And so that played a big role as well, so much so that, eventually my parents separated. And at that same time, this sailing, let's say, program that I was involved with at the yacht club ended. It just naturally ended. And so at that time, I sort of really kind of almost started heading off onto the wrong path. And I had some really good mates, that you just would do anything for, but really was sort of starting to get into, definitely heading the wrong direction. And so it was really funny enough, my old man saw this while he was dealing with his own issues, and he said, listen, there's a boxing gym, that was funded by the police. Funny enough, it was called a Police Boys Club up in North Sydney. And he said, listen, I think you should go in there. And that honestly just saved me. It was the coach was like, just one of the best guys I've ever met. He just had a huge heart. He was fantastic at sort of getting kids to really sort of connect and open up with him. And it was it was just kids from everywhere, all sorts of different backgrounds. It didn't matter, but you all ended up with the same sort of relationship where you would just do anything for this guy. And he was like a second father sort of to everyone. So that he sort of really put me back on the right path and set some really good morals. And funny enough, as soon as I started doing that, my sailing really started going well. because I think for I don't know, I just enjoyed having something different from the sailing, and I was doing a lot of other sports too, rugby and cricket, everything I could at school. But I don't know, the thing I saw from boxing is that there is no shortcuts, and it's so friggin' honest, like it's just, mate, it's obvious if you're making mistakes, and then, well, how are you really going to deal with pressure, and okay, you can get pressure in sailing, you can get pressure rugby and that, but boxing, when someone's literally trying to knock you out, it's a different kind of pressure. And I don't need to tell you this, but it's so anyway, it was just that sort of mentality to be successful and be, let's say, competitive. You just couldn't take any shortcuts. You had to, and so I applied, let's say, that sort of mentality that Tony, the coach, really instilled in all the fighters at the Police Boys Club, and I really noticed some big changes in my sailing.
A big part of your game now is your mental approach and your work ethic, along with everything else. Because with that all, you've got a high talent. To me, what I'm thinking about. So when you go back to that age and you think about where you were then, were you always naturally that way inclined in terms of the way you think? In terms of what we're born with and what we teach ourselves. Where would you be on the scale at that age, and where were you starting to get to?
Yeah, look, I don't think I had much talent at all, to be quite honest with you. I was in an environment where I was spending hours on the water, so that was one thing, and you can't shortcut those sort of hours. But I didn't. I thought there were quite a lot of people that had a lot more talent than me. I felt like in sailing and to be quite honest, most of the sports I was doing. But what I did notice is that some of the guys with all the talent weren't necessarily the guys that worked the hardest. And they weren't necessarily the guys too that you would, even though, they may have got all the talent, they may not have been my first picks if I was putting a sporting team together or a rugby team or whatever the team was. And the guys that I would think, oh, I really want that guy on my team, was the guy you'd see, he'd be the first guy there. He'd just be working his ass off. And not only that, probably the key part for me was he would just do anything. He would put himself on the line for his teammates, And so that, I was just so lucky to be surrounded by people that were better than me, and for the most part had those sort of morals and disciplines, because that really, I saw how successful they were becoming and valuable to the people around them. I couldn't help but be sort of dragged up to their level, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't so much a luck. I mean, it may have been a luck initially, but once you started being that person in the room around these type of people, I guess you gradually build your way over to them, and you like to be around them, because that seems to be, like when we talk about students, like I've told a lot of people when I train you, we've been in particular situations under extreme fatigue, I will teach you something, you'd say copy or affirmative, and then in the right context, very soon after, it would happen. How much do you need to be a good student in life, and what makes you a good student? How do you keep working at that?
Yeah, I just think it's fundamental. I mean, you've got to have that sort of appetite, and that's why I love working with guys like you and people that are at a very, very high level, because it's just such a, from a brain and developmental point of view, learning something new, and that education is, man, it's from my experience, definitely some of the most rewarding parts of my life, and that, going out of your comfort zone, being, a good mate of mine in the military here, would say to me, listen, you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so that means really going out of your comfort zone. Because if at the end of the day, as we all know, if you really want to learn something about yourself, you got to put yourself in a tough situation. If you want to learn something about a teammate, you're not going to learn that winning. You're going to learn more about that teammate and yourself in a real tough situation, in a real tough loss, if you make a big mistake, what are you going to do? You're going to try and sort of hide it under the carpet. You're going to put your hand up, show a bit of candor. So yeah, that was, from what I saw, just being honest with yourself and your teammates. That was huge, because if you could get that sort of a culture, especially in a team environment, man, the development, you could really step it up. Where if there was, let's say, a lot of egos or guys really sort of protecting themselves or didn't want to discuss, mistakes, it was hard to progress forwards. And it just didn't have that same sort of team mentality from the successful teams I'd seen.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what you did for a number of years, from a young guy who debuted at 20 to just 10 years later, you become the youngest ever to win the America's Cup. Talk to us about that moment and the process involved in that, pretty much at the end, in terms of being so young, the pressures come into that, because I have no doubt that there would have been headlines, there would have been people putting the pressure on you as an individual with that milestone ahead of you. That would have made it hard.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, I think certainly in the sport of sailing in America's Cup, let's say that the helmsman and typically, let's say, the skippers are really kind of like the figureheads of these teams. And it actually couldn't be further from the truth, because not only, do you have a team on board the boat that you actually race with, but you have a huge support team actually behind you. Really either keeping the boat running, or coaches, design, engineering, shore team. So such a big group. And for the most part, a lot of the recognition really does go to the sailors and the guys, the athletes on the water. So yeah, but again, I was pretty lucky early on that my dad sort of instilled this in me that, guys that don't get along and respect the crew, they don't go far. You say, look, you see those guys that are out in the water just yelling and blowing up. I mean, one, it shows that they just can't keep it together when the pressure's on. But two, like, would you want to sail and be in a team with someone like that? And so that really sort of hung, and starting out sailing with my sister, man, I mean, if anyone's got siblings, shit, I mean, the first thing you do is fight. So, full credit to her. Oh my God. I mean, in the beginning, but, yeah, so that I think that was just a really key lesson. The other thing I saw when I came into the game was majority of the skippers in the first America's Cup I did when I was, 1920, weren't that fit. And so, I really enjoyed that, because I love the competitive side and the training, and I saw the mental benefits, of, being under fatigue and that. And so I felt that when you get to a time when you have to ask the guys on the boat to throw themselves in the fire, if you've gone through some of the pain, in the gym, and just put yourself there every single time, they won't even hesitate to, they will throw themselves in the middle of the fire without even thinking about it, if you've gone through that. And so, yeah, that was just lucky to learn that at a young age, because I was just surrounded by very, very good guys.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about team and the dynamics and the culture very shortly, because you would know all about that with barriers and everything you did going to different syndicates and racing for them. But you mentioned that it's not when you win that you learn, it's when you lose that you learn. So can you give us an example of that, like one of the losses that you took more painfully than anything else, and what you learned from that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, probably the hardest one was probably the Cup in Bermuda, because we had won the previous two cups. We were going for 3 in a row. It was just an unbelievable opportunity. And, I was responsible running the team, and really just, dropped the ball in a big way. And it was, it was really tough to take, because you have, not only, I guess one of the biggest sins for me is really, if I let my teammates down. And so for me, that was really the ultimate failure. I mean, we would, well, in a nutshell, to summarize it super quickly, basically we were too conservative. And, an America's Cup is a development program. So a lot of the time the race can almost be won a year or two out by some of these fundamental strategic decisions you take at a technical level, setting up your campaign. So number one, too conservative. And I think, again, because we're going for the third win in a row, we just naturally, and my hands up here, started to get a little bit more defensive. So if we were discussing a design decision or a foil or a wing or whatever it was, we'd be discussing two ends of the spectrum, and more often than not, I would say we'd probably meet in the middle. We'd go the conservative route. Where the other campaigns leading into that, man, we were shooting for the fence. We were just pushing every, like let's push. So I had allowed the team to basically get themselves into a mentality of defensive, conservative, and ultimately also at the end on the water just didn't go with my instincts on and off the water. So that was a tough lesson, because you let down not only your teammates, families. I mean, been working for 4 years. Larry Ellison had been backing the team and I for a number of years. So it was a really tough thing to take. But again, what are you going to do? And to really, honour all your teammates and the effort that went into it, you really have to be honest and candid about it, and really go through it. Take your time. Okay, what did I get wrong here? What could I have done better? Because although it was a tough pill to swallow, it's actually an incredible learning opportunity, and an awesome opportunity to get stronger and get some growth out of it. So that was a big one, was the America's Cup 2017 in Bermuda.
Now, when you mentioned strong teams, you've been amongst some very strong teams. For a lot of people here who've got small businesses and they've got teams themselves, or whether it be teams on the sporting field, everyone that's watching in, if you can succinctly give us some key components that you've been common denominators in these great teams of yours that you can share with us.
Well, it's always, I think, whether you see a business or a sporting team, the most successful ones seem to have a great culture within that team, and almost a bit of a mission statement and a way of operating. Like, okay, guys, how are we going to operate here? One thing that's been really interesting, I mean, look, I've been in the game now over 20 years, and there's, in every America's Cup cycle, there's always, let's say, like a new kind of breakthrough or a technology or a concept that can really be a big key driver in the America's Cup. Interestingly enough, that idea, the majority of times that I've seen in the campaigns, doesn't come from someone that's been in the game 20 years. It actually comes from someone that's new. So someone that's come in from the outside, from the fresh look, that's come out and thrown this idea out there. But the important point is that idea will never come out unless the environment is such that they feel like they can say something without embarrassment.
Gotcha.
I mean, like if I'm not afraid to come out and say something in the America's Cup team, because I've been involved for so long. If you're in a rugby league, you're talking strategy, whatever, well, of course you're going to come out. But you think about your first time in a big team, you're quite reserved. And so if the environment is, oh, hey guys, the experienced guys are going to dominate these meetings and these discussions, well, you're never going to get much creativity. And let's face it, from what I've seen, it's unlikely a new out-of-the-box idea is going to come from someone that's been in the game for that long.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about having that culture and environment where it's really, it's encouraged to hear these new ideas and not cut someone down. They may say 9 crazy things, or things that you may have thought about before. But man, that 10th idea, it might be the one. And if you're not harboring that sort of thinking and inviting it, then you'll never get it.
I love that. That's great insight, because that's often the difference, right? If you've got a carefree environment, or an environment where you feel supported to say whatever it is, like you said, it could be the second, or the 9th or the 10th thing that you come up with that makes all the difference. What, in terms of that leadership that you bring, because I know you police that a lot, where did you think you found that from and honed that over the years? Because leadership is one of the big qualities I've seen with you, with ethic as well as open thinking and carefree thinking.
Well, I've just been fortunate to work with some of the most successful guys in the game, like guys like Russell Coates, some of the guys around him that came through the ranks, some amazing designers and engineers, guys that are multiple Olympic champions. And as I saw a lot of these guys, the way they would let's say behave in meetings, they would actually say the least. When I first came into these sort of teams, I was expecting the sort of most successful and experienced guys to really be kind of dominating the meeting, but the guys that really do well, funny enough, they're saying the least. And when they do say something, it is, it is something that's bang on. But really, what they're doing is they're allowing that open environment to encourage people to sort of speak up and get confidence. And so, yeah, just being able to see that. And when you're young, especially when you're a young male, man, you know everything.
Yeah, of course.
So it does take a little bit of time to figure that out, and you need a little tune up every now and then. But yeah, again, just fortunate from a young age to sort of see that put in play.
Okay, so with all these different syndicates, Gary, there's sometimes language barriers and there's cultural barriers. I mean, not culture with the way the team is just performing and how we mentioned in terms of everyone being on the same page, but there's different points of views and different personalities. How have you found that? I mean, even some of these owners of the syndicates, it's been hard to deal with. So where does Jimmy have his say, do what he needs to do, but in some way keep the peace or keep being that tip of the spear without going off direction?
Well, the only way to operate from my experience, and I've done it, a couple of different ways, is to be just upfront, honest, and candid. You basically, from what I've seen, if there are, and you got to expect it when you're dealing with, alpha male sort of athlete, competitive guys. Of course, it's good to actually see a bit of energy in there and guys really wanting it. So there's going to be the odd flare up. But as long as everyone buys into the culture of, listen, if I've got a problem with someone, I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to go grab the guy, sit down, and I'm going to have a discussion. And whether I need to bring someone into that discussion, no problem. But how could that guy possibly change? If I've got a problem with you, there's no point me going to speak to Leo or Vance or someone about it, because how could you possibly change if I don't come and speak to you and discuss the issue I've got? So being candid and honest and upfront. And then the other thing with dealing with guys, relationship with Larry Ellison and some of these owners is, again, just being upfront and honest. Don't make excuses. I made that mistake once and I'll never ever do it again, because they just won't settle for it. And look, you just have to be upfront, just like you are to your teammates. You just got to be completely open and honest with them.
Okay, so by the next America's Cup coming around, it'll be close to 25 years that you've been in the game, and you keep reinventing yourself. Or I like to know, how do you stay on, and what do you do to be in that position to be at your absolute best?
Yeah, look, I've always found that healthy body is healthy mind, and I've always, in my role, a lot of it's about making, especially on the boats, we're now racing, split second fast decisions, under pressure that are going to have consequences. And so I've always found I've got to be in great shape, but I've also got to be open-minded to some new ways of training. I'm really fascinated about how we make decisions and how the brain works and why we get into a state of flow sometimes, why sometimes we don't, why do we make bad decisions? Why do we make good decisions? What leads to that? So that's always been really, really fascinating. And like anything, I think you've got to look out of your world into other worlds. And that's why, the training with you, getting to speak and spend time with mates in the military, people that go in these different environments and some of them, life-threatening, have to make life or death decisions. Well, okay, how do you guys do it, and understand that side? I've really enjoyed that. The other part, or again, I've just been fortunate. I'm involved in the time of the game when we started sailing typical monohull sailing boats, like the boats you see out on Auckland Harbour. So now these things are literally flying. And so for a lot of the campaigns over the past decade or more, it's something no one's ever done. There's not like there's some roadmap. And, in our world, a little bit like going to the moon, where you sort of kind of learning as you go along. And that in itself is just so friggin' stimulating and exciting, because you get to work with just some amazing builders, engineers, shore guys, obviously, athletes as well. So it's just a very, very, fun time to be involved. It's just not the same standard old boat that's been there for 20 years.
Okay, now you mentioned military a few times, and you're very much a high performance athlete. When you talk about non-negotiables, can you share some of those non-negotiables with us of Jimmy James Spithill?
Well, I think the non-negotiable is surround myself with people that are going to make me better, be a better person, and really ultimately be a role model for me, and people that I want to hang around. Let's face it. As you would know, as we get families and kids, and we have different work obligations, you've only got so much time. So you may as well spend it with people you want to be spending it with, and doing things that you're really enjoying and get something out of. So for me nowadays, and it took me a while to learn this, that I just, man, a non-negotiable is spending with people that will make me better, but I really want to, enjoy hanging out with.
I know, I love that. Okay, and now you're a big fan of quotes. I'm a fan of quotes myself. Share with us some of your favorite quotes, and why in particular they're your favorite quotes.
Yeah, I'd say only the fit are fearless. This was all sort of, there was a whole bunch of sayings that were on the wall, kind of above this boxing ring. So yeah, only the fit are fearless was a good one. The harder you work, the luckier you get. I mean, those ones, I think, especially for me, in that, I had to really work hard to try and get myself even close to sort of where my teammates were. That one really, really stuck out for me. But I think the big one is ultimately, just never give up, and you just keep picking yourself back up. There is something you see it. You probably, I guess in combat sports, but you can really see someone that will just refuse to throw the towel in, and there's certain guys out there that you would just go, man, I want that guy, standing behind me if we ever have to go into a battle. So yeah, that sort of approach is, that's probably a few key ones.
Yeah, and just lastly, man, in terms of how long this career may last, have you got GP series is on right now. That's an exciting event, and it looks pretty cool when you see that unfold on TV. How long for you on the water, my man? Because you're already a multi-millionaire.
I'm just trying to catch you, brother. Look, I mean, look, I'll be involved for as long as I can be, a help to the team getting the result. It's as simple as that. And something that's, certainly athletes and people that I've always looked up to are ones that, one, have had longevity in the game, kept themselves at a super high competitive level for a long period of time. And there's some great examples of that, I think, when you look at the world today. But also guys that have been able to reinvent themselves off the field and when the career is over, that too, because I think for a lot of athletes or certainly, let's say some of my mates in the military, that can be probably one of the hardest challenges in life is what do you do when it's over, and being able to reinvent yourself. And certainly, that's, I mean, you're definitely someone I've looked up to there. They're, not only doing it with a couple of different sports, but the ability from a business standpoint, media, personal training. I mean, the list goes on to really, continue to evolve. That is something I really, want to do. Sort of look at that as an example, and I think, man, yeah, that's what I would love to do. The athletes like yourself that are able to go on and do that. So yeah, Soldier P is fantastic. I love I love the concept of it. I still love the cup. I mean, it's in me since a little. I love the development and that. And yeah, I'd love to get into sort of in terms of Sail GP, the real goal is to somehow, trying to, take equity in the team and really set something up. So there really is a great professional league and, a place for that next generation athlete to come and really make an awesome living and be successful, just like so many other athletes are in different sports. It'd be great to have that regular season professional circuit out there. So yeah, we'll see, mate. We'll see. I'll be ready to give you a few rounds any day, mate. You just tell me when and where.
I can't wait. I miss that. I miss our morning beatings, mate. Just on that, just finally, as you were talking about these syndicates, whether it be GP, whether it be America's Cup, is that something you want to do? Because I know you're heavily involved in investments and obviously making some really good business decisions yourself. You're just being very humble. Is that something we may see down the line?
Yeah, well, one thing I noticed at a young age is and young athletes have got to think about this too, is that you need to think about a backup plan. Well, I certainly did. And the reason I did is I saw a couple of mates who went on to, that were heading down the professional rugby career, because I loved the game. I would play, but I wasn't ever going to make it, in rugby or rugby league, get injured and got injured. And that was it. It was done, and so they had a few great years, but they didn't really, they sort of thought the ride would never end, and didn't really take that opportunity. So early on, I remember thinking, well, okay, what are some of the successful guys doing? And really started to look around. And I think that, just asking the question, because, it's one thing I think, I've got kids, I know you do. I struggle with this part of the schooling system, is that you don't really get taught about money. It's the most practical thing, and probably one of the most important things in your life, funny enough. Like, your whole world kind of revolves around it. But in my schooling, it just wasn't really taught. And certainly they could have just taught some real practical stuff, so you could understand it. And then maybe whether you're going, whatever it is, sport or business, whatever it is, you could, from early on, be in a better spot from a planning perspective. So I love all the business side, but again, it's just the growth, just the ability to get out there and learn, and be presenting to sponsors and understand, okay, well, how does this all work? And man, I can tell you, there's a lot of times I'm so in over my head and I don't know what I'm doing, but that's kind of exciting as well. And as long as you've got some guys around you that you can trust and you can go and talk to, and who are good at some of those things that you're not so good at, then it's just like building a sporting team. You just got to build a great team around you on the land, and go and ask some questions and ask some advice.
Yeah, absolutely love that, bro. You still didn't answer my question. Simple yes or no. Are we going to see you owning a syndicate one day, bro? GP Series, America's Cup.
Yeah, you can own it, and I'll run it for you, mate.
Yeah, sure.
No, look, I would love to, for sure. I mean, that is a goal. We have to see where it's going, but again, it's guys like sort of Russell Coutts and Larry Ellison that are really sort of, making this, giving it the best shot it can be. The America's Cup is so unique. The biggest struggle is not a regular season. Like here we are today. It's not like we just raced the cup yesterday, but we don't know where the next one is. So that's always, it's got this awesome intrigue. And like I said, I love it. I want to keep doing it. But it's tough, especially when you get family, because it really doesn't have a regular season because of its unique set of circumstances.
Absolutely, bro. Bro, in 1983, you were inspired by the neighbours down the road when they won the America's Cup. And I'm sure over the 20-plus years you've been involved in dominating on the water, you've inspired so many other people, bro. So I thank you for that. Thank you for your time, because this, you could be off there in San Diego doing whatever you wanted to do, but you always have the time for the people who ask, man. And it's something I've always admired about you. And you're a good man to be around. So, Jimmy Spithill, thank you so much for your time, my man. And if you need that pool cleaner, I maybe just be coming over to do that job for you, okay, brother? And then I'll double over as a personal trainer too. How about that?
For sure. But on a serious note, Mons, I just want to thank you, obviously from me, but really for the community, like you've become one hell of a role model, and, not just on and off the sporting field, from a business point of view. And so for everything you've done in the community and the people around you, man, thanks very much.
Much love, brother. Much love. Catch up soon, eh? Thanks, Jimmy.